Thank you so much for braving this cold weather to join us today. My name is Luce Lanzad, and I'm the Program Officer for Korean Studies here at the Korea Society. I'm so delighted to see so many people excited about learning more about Korean popular culture and how it's overtaken the world. I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Hyangsoon Yi. She received her PhD in English from Pennsylvania State University, and she also has a PhD in language education from University of Georgia. Her research interests include Irish drama, Irish and Scottish travelers, nomadism, narrative theory, Korean literature and cinema, Japanese cinema, and Buddhism. She has published articles on Irish drama, Japanese cinema, and language pedagogy. She is currently writing a book on itinerancy and Irish drama. Please welcome Dr. Yi.
Thank you very much for giving me this wonderful opportunity to taste the cold weather. Georgia is warm. Okay, so I'm sure that most of you heard about K-pop. Yes? Yeah. Before we start talking about K-pop and cinema, which is today's topic, let me briefly explain the context. So to understand the origin of K-pop, we need to place it in a cultural context, which is called the Korean wave. And in Korean, it's called Hallyu. And Han means Korea or Korean, and Ryu means flow. So it's a Korean flow, Korean fashion, Korean style, things like that. So the Korean wave refers to the global spread of Korean, South Korean, I have to say, South Korean culture since roughly the 1990s. And the term Korean wave was coined, they say, some Chinese journalists in the 1990s, mid-1990s, who noted that growing popularity of South Korean cultural exports among Chinese youngsters. So they started calling the whole trend Korean wave, of course, in Chinese Hallyu. And the Korean wave first rose with the broadcasting of Korean television dramas. And then the popularity of the television dramas were followed by Korean films and then K-pop. And then, of course, it sort of influenced on the growing number of sort of language schools for Korean. And then now spread to cuisine, which was also interestingly stimulated by this very famous television drama called Jewel in the Palace, then fashion, etc., etc. So now the Korean wave has evolved into a phenomenon that indicates a growing popularity of everything Korean. At least that's the way the Korean government tries to sort of use as part of their other efforts to promote Korean culture. Okay, so to sort of summarize, the whole phenomenon rose in late 1990s. Well, it started in the early 1990s, but as a global phenomenon that we saw as a kind of cultural sort of trend. It's mostly from late 1990s, and then there are two particular television dramas that created this trend. One is Winter Sonata, which was huge success in Japan, 2002, and then that spread further to Southeast Asia. But then the television drama that Chinese audience loved, Chinese public loved, was a drama about food. So it's a Jewel in the Palace that was created in 2003. So you can see that the full bloom of Korean wave came in the early 2000s. So let's talk about K-pop music. So the term K-pop indicates a musical genre originating in South Korea. Of course, as a generic term, it indicates all kinds of popular music that sort of spontaneously grew in the populace. So popular music existed in pre-modern Korea as well as in modern Korea, but the way the term is used in academia as well as in the mass media tends to focus on contemporary form of Korean popular music that comprises so many different genres, such as you can see here on the bottom, dance pop and electronic, techno, rock and rap and hip hop and R&B, etc. So it basically mixes all different genres of sort of Western music, popular music, but especially American, music, popular music. Just to give you just a general sense of what this K-pop is, you see lots of teen idol groups like Super Junior, Kara, Big Bang, 2PM, Girls' Generation, 2NE1, FX, etc., etc. And later I will mention more specifically how each of these groups, the major groups, sort of contributed to proliferating K-pop on a global scale. Then we also have individual singers whose popularity went beyond the Korean borders. So we have Rain. Some of you probably heard about Rain, and then Boa, who she's still popular, but who made a #1 in the Japanese Oricon music chart, and then Psy, of course. So origins of K-pop. I'd like to address this topic from 3 different perspectives. One is sort of artists, okay, who actually initiated, who kind of created this phenomenon in the beginning. Then secondly, sort of industrial environment, so system, okay, and then of course consumer group. So we'll start out with the famous boy band Seotaeji and Boys. So in 1992, this new boy band called Seotaeji and Boys took the Korean audience by storm by performing a song and dance which most Koreans had never really experienced before in popular media. So it was shocking to everybody, just about everybody in the culture industry. And Seotaeji was a lead singer of the group. And their maverick appearance in contemporary Korean music scene and their distinctly different music and dance attracted immense attention from young Koreans. And the core of their music style was mostly rock and rap and hip hop, but their explosive popularity was largely based on their experimentation with diverse styles of music. So already those different styles of music were very fresh to young Koreans. And then the whole socio-cultural phenomenon of this young fandom sort of shocked the Korean public at large. One of the important reasons for their popularity was that their songs addressed many social problems which musicians in the previous era didn't dare to deal with, mostly because of the sort of a political environment. I'm talking about military regime. So during that period, popular music tried to stay away from any controversial social and political issues. And Seo didn't really directly sort of attack the problems, but indirectly did that by kind of singing all these issues that Korean youth had to deal with, and the origins of all those problems that the youth culture, had. Was the political and sort of a larger political, the oppressive political atmosphere. So Seo boys took very iconoclastic attitudes toward the conservative and even oppressive mainstream society's attitude toward youth culture. So instead of study, Seo said, okay, I'm dropout, high school dropout. And let me show you that academic success is not all in your life. So his, of course, subsequent popularity and commercial, sort of the value and I mean the commercial value of his band clearly sort of kept in line with that Korea's economic boom, and then slowly impacting the public that wow, study and good education is not necessarily the only important thing in success. Of course, these youngsters just absorb this shocking message, much more sensitively than adults. I mean, the adults or older generations. So Seo became immediately a national icon, radical youth culture, and then eventually he got nicknamed as Korea's culture president. And his fame got to the point that even Chinese fans just crazy about him, and Beijing University recognized years later Seo's contribution to creating very vibrant East Asian youth culture from early 1990s that they invited him as an honorary member of their music faculty. So we heard that they gave him a small office and desk whenever, he could. He was kind of free to come and give a lecture. I don't know how many times he did that because he's a little bit of sort of a reclusive person. So as a person, as an individual, he's not very approachable. But in public media, he was all over basically. So it was quite a cultural phenomenon. So Seotejian boys essentially shifted overall paradigm, cultural paradigm in Korean music industry. And from this point on, you started seeing a lot of these elements of American popular music sort of incorporating different sort of genres of music in Korea. So you can certainly say that Seotejian boys are the sort of visual, the starter of K-pop from historical point of view. So why don't we take a look at their debut performance? And it was just kind of talent show. I'm going to tell you later kind of interesting episode about this. But let's take a look at video clip as a number one, Seoteji, Peter.
Check this out.
Okay, maybe we can stop here. Okay, thank you. So looking back, you find that, well, it's not so fantastic, but this was a turning point in the history of Korean popular music because people never thought that they were such a kind of, this, the genes and all that. And then you can clearly see the American influence there. But anyway, so this was a television show and sort of recruiting new talents. Guess what? This was their first public performance, and they got very low grade on this show. So nobody really paid much attention. However, the audience went crazy about them. So immediately they started getting all these spotlights. And I think it was mentioned probably in MTV program, and there are sort of catch, rap lyrics and beats and this chorus to Korean audience by storm. So from a historical point of view, it can certainly be said that the first generation of K-pop artists emerged in the early 1990s, and Seo Boys sort of set the sort of success format, in mixing rap and the dance and very sort of a strong, in a way, strong sort of a lyric to the ear of the youth. So these musicians began to incorporate a lot of other elements from, again, American popular music. And representative artists from the first generation of a K-pop, it's a Yoo Jun, who's, by the way, Korean American based in California, and Jinwoo Sean, and Drunken Tiger, among others. The second perspective on the emergence of Korean pop, K-pop, is the establishment of the system, the agencies. One of the most important, Peter, can we go back to, yeah, thank you. Okay. Another important element in the successful development of K-pop industry was this large-scale talent agency and record label. And many of you, I don't know, heard about SM Entertainment. This was established in 1995, which was followed by another large entertainment sort of management company, YG Entertainment, and then again JYP Entertainment. It's interesting that SM Entertainment was formed by a gentleman called Isuman, who was our classmate, and we thought that was kind of, a mediocre singer. But then this was the beginning. Now he is one of the richest, one of the most famous, figures, sort of celebrities in entertainment industry, and his ambition was global even at that time. So eventually he actually provided the system, and then of course other equally sort of ambitious and talented people joined the efforts, and they established a separate entertainment sort of companies. What they did was they recruited very young and talented sort of teenagers, 9 to 11 in terms of age, and then they provide them a long-term systematic training in, of course, singing and dancing, and then foreign languages, especially English and Japanese and Chinese, and then, of course, general skills, very graceful manners to deal with fans. So these young kids were recruited and then basically got the schooling in this system, and financially these companies sort of invested in all this from a long-term perspective. So SM Entertainment established that type of industrial structure for K-pop to grow on a totally different level from like the kind of the business we saw pre-1990s. And then how K-pop developed since then. Oh, I'm sorry, I think I missed something here. Okay, well, there's this new audience, the third factor, consumers. So we have this new type of artists, and then system, and then somebody should consume the new cultural products. So the success of Sautesian Boys brought a completely new audience, teenagers. So teenagers and young adults quickly became big sort of a fan base of this phenomenon, and their their power as consumers, not only just cultural products, the money they brought in, eventually gave rise to more and more idol bands, sort of young boys and girl bands that, of course, sort of synchronized with the system that I just talked about. So the representative idol groups from the mid 1990s were H.O.T., which is considered the first K-pop idol boy band, which was formed in 1995, Jack's Kiss, SES, Finkel, Baby Box, and the Xinhua, etc., etc. One of the interesting factors that kind of accelerate this whole process was the, ironically, big financial crisis that East Asia experienced in mid 1990s, especially late 1990s. Korea had a big financial crisis. So SM Entertainment and other even smaller scale management companies started looking outside Korea, especially Japan and China. So that also helped the K-pop become later, of course, a global kind of cultural phenomenon. So sometimes they aim specifically like a Chinese markets and Japanese markets and things like that. So here, BoA reached number one in Japanese Oricon music. It's like Billboard in Japan. So she's a female singer and very young, very tender in age. And then, of course, she's now an adult, and she also entered acting, and all that. But she was a single person who made this, record that year. And then, of course, a little bit later, Rain also gave a sold-out concert in Beijing. This was also another important sort of event. And then from the mid 2000s, all kinds of groups from Korea dominated the East Asian music market. So this was probably the very sort of auspicious signs of this globalization of Korean popular music. And later, and to this day, it's still spreading, but specifically Southeast Asia, the Middle East, and South America, and some of the Asian American community in North America and other minority groups in Western Europe. I found last time when I went to Paris that North African immigrant communities love this K-pop. So there's something that kind of appealed to them. So this is followed by kind of growing global interest in other cultural products. So it has become almost a subculture among teenagers and young adults. And so finally, somebody called it South Korea's greatest, export. And from this point on, the Korean government began to pay very serious attention to the K-pop and K-dramas and Korean films, so that they could use this as a promotional sort of a channel for a lot of other export items. I think I was that time assistant professor, and we got sometimes very friendly messages from Consul General that, well, you can, if you want to organize anything about Korean pop culture, we'll support you. And then, of course, they want to send other promotional materials like automobile companies and things like that. So I vividly remember, when the government and other business groups, Samsung and LG, whatnot, Hyundai, started paying attention to this. They thought that it's just a kind of, very passing transient phenomenon, very whimsical teenager kind of stuff. But then they started seeing that, wow, there's something really solid there. So we thought it would go maximum 5-6 years, but it's still going on. Although the last couple of years we see a little bit of a decline in terms of sort of a musical style, and that's kind of a bit of a mannerism, but still it's strong, and it's expanding in South America, which is very interesting, in Eastern Europe. So they say that in Turkey and in even Islamic culture, some youngsters sort of they're to come out and dance and to this K-pop tunes, and then there are like 100 fan clubs in Mexico and Peru and Brazil and things like that. And when the Korean president visited Egypt, there was official request from some youth organizations that he should, they want sort of hope the president to put a little bit of pressure, on these groups so that they would visit. And of course, this is not just K-pop, but other actors, and who became very famous in Egypt and Turkey and especially Iran through television dramas. So they there is a synergetic, sort of energy between the genres. Okay, so there are these fandoms. Clearly, sort of a global scale fandoms became the fourth factor in in the development of K-pop. Okay, let's take a look at a typical one. Okay, number 2, 소녀시대. Peter, could you? Yeah, number 2. So this is a girls' generation. So when this song was released, this group had already become, a very famous group. And, they Thank you. So this group, this girl group, was sort of swept the chart in Korea and Japan, and for a while in China as well. And they also were featured and they appeared on the late night show with David Letterman and Live with Kelly in 2012. So they kind of made a very successful appearance in American media. And then they were also awarded the Video of the Year in 2013. I think it's a YouTube Music Awards for the music video of this one, the I Got a Boy. It's interesting to see that if the 1990s were mostly sort of K-pop was mostly sort of a regional phenomenon in Asia. It's this kind of intra-Asian sort of exchange in terms of cultural products. From 2000, it became a little bit of a slowly but definitely as a global phenomenon. So we have other groups which contribute to that, and we'll take sort of a look at Super Junior, number 3. It's another boy group, but definitely different from Sotegi. You can see that right here. The song is called Mr. Simple. It's a different musical style. I tried to find the version with English subtitles to the lyric, but as the image is not really clear, so I got the official video. Thank you. So their popularity is, of course, based on this group performance. As a group, they are called the Super Junior. But individual members also became very famous, and then some of them kind of have a huge followers in Korea and outside of Korea. There are some of them, especially those who have good acting, skills, also cross genre and played in various television dramas and films. So K-pop industry became almost a supplier of these young talents in other genres of Korean popular culture. Especially in television dramas, you see tall, very handsome, really very charismatic sort of young actors, and especially boys. And they don't stay there long. This is one of their strategies. They make a quick appearance in these television dramas, and everybody says, "Oh, who is this new actor?" Then by the time we get to know the actor, they kind of disappear, and then they go back to their original sort of a job, which is this group sort of singing and dancing. So they are very versatile, and as I told you, they grew up together as a from very young age, from early teens. So they bond personally, very close to each other, and they understand all these wars and grievances, working as a young idols in this competitive and merciless, impersonal sort of industry, and so in some ways they became, they're good friends, and then they grew up together. So their performance is not just, their sort of bodily sort of choreographing, but their sort of minds and intuition and everything. So that's one of the key factors of their success. So we have definitely this Japanese sort of fandoms and Chinese fandoms, and slowly Southeast Asian groups, like especially in Thailand, and then Malaysia, Singapore, even Cambodia. And by then already, like late 2000, the Korean government sometimes even sends out these groups first before they introduce new products, new cars, and new, home appliances. So in Southeast Asian countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, and Vietnam, you can't really tell which is which, because these two sort of economic expansion and then cultural promotion came together. And as you can see, there are lots of things that we can talk about their sort of characteristics. So as you can see, there are some 21, Girl Generation, Big Bang. So we're going to take a look at a totally different style of a group. Let's try Big Bang number 4, please. Yeah. Now, these two music videos appeal American or sort of a Western audience, or Asian Americans, rather than Asians in Asia. This group is called Big Bang, very popular now. So each group has their own trademark, and Big Bang was also quite a phenomenon. So you can clearly see this socio-political message although disguised in sort of no man's land and doesn't specify the Korea, but you can see that this very rebellious youth culture in different. These are sort of lion dances, very famous traditional lion dances. So sometimes you see this Korean touch here and there, or Asian touch, mixed well actually with this distinctly, I would say American style of music and dance.
Fantastic, baby.
Thank you. So this is Big Bang. Okay. Now let's go back to my, okay. So as you can see clearly, several characteristics notable that very diverse in terms of audiovisual elements. It's not just musical elements, more of a sort of, this very pleasant sort of these visual elements. So there are lots of contents that entertain the audience in terms of, images. And then, as you can see, fusion of a synthesized music, and then you can see that clearly, right? This digital technology and wonderful editing skills, dance routines, and especially colorful outfits. This sort of, stimulated a lot. It is a sort of a cosmetic industry, and also designers of those, very youthful sort of these cool outfits for young consumers. And then, of course, what we call bubblegum pop, right, with elements of electro, disco, rock, whatever. So these are all sort of mixed, and then they sometimes just kind of show the whole range in one music video. And then synchronized dance moves. So usually it's multiple singers in a band, and they at least 3. And I think Super Junior's once reached the 13. So it's like a huge group. So you never get bored because each member moves differently, and then suddenly they sort of come into a very unified sort of format, and then dance in the proper movements in synchrony, so right, synchronous sort of dance moves. So their choreography, including also this very hooking, repetitive sort of dance, and then also lyric, and then that kind of get you hooked their performance. In terms of this industry, like I said, there's a large management agencies. They say they produce on average 60 boy and girl bands per year. But how many eventually got this wonderful opportunity to go public? You never know. In other words, when one group made a huge success, the rest 50-some, these idol groups kind of disappear or disbanded, and sometimes, they create problems as well, because their contract clearly says that they'll be given this opportunity, or that they're sort of almost a promise that they will be introduced to this market, that market, but that those promises became sort of not really fulfilled. Systematic training of singers. Sometimes they say that it's not just the talent, but something else that these recruiters pay attention to. But a lot of times, especially if you look at those successful groups, you see that they are good singers individually, then they work together. So there's a very rigorous system of developing their musical skills. And then from industrial point of view, the use of digital technology. And again, that was boosted by the whole, the phenomenon was boosted by the Korean government's emphasis on the developing information technology, right? and spread of all these social media, etc., etc. One of the most important factors that scholars of media and media studies talk about is how K-pop spread out to all corners of the globe by using the internet as a main distribution channel instead of the traditional, CDs, DVDs. So it just instantly reached all these remote places in the world, and most of the times for free of charge. That this was the sort of the most important factor, and in fact a gimmick, for their success. So all those Sateji's group didn't enjoy this as much as the subsequent groups did, but Big Bang and Girl Generation and other groups certainly benefited from this fast developing this industry and information technology. Another important development from mid 2000 and this is almost a kind of general practice now, is that these agencies hire foreign songwriters, especially those who could kind of tie them to American music industry. They try to crack into American music market so hard. They hired lots of American songwriters and producers, and they actually worked together for a while. In some cases successful, but not everybody. For instance, JYP came here, and he already was a big name in Korean culture industry. But when he came to New York, he was nobody. But he worked very hard with, momentarily I forgot the name of this producer in New York, an American producer. And what he could do is actually he brought a girl group called the Wonder Girls. They tried this retro type. And then after that, no more. So they tried the different formulas, and some were good at that, and many others actually failed. And of course, American music market is so hard to get into. So this is probably the only sort of bulwark that the K-pop has not yet sort of made a successful entry into. And their marketing strategies, okay? Definitely, they aim at global entertainment market, no more Korean domestic market. There are lots of hybrid transnational values. One of the specific things that they did is that when they form a new group, they recruit 1 or 2 Chinese members, definitely geared toward China. Very famous male singer called Nikkun from Thailand, 2 p.m. So, and FX has a Chinese member. So these are multinational bands. So when they have a concert in China, in Southeast Asia, they, of course, highlight how successful these non-Korean members of the groups are in this industry. So you can see that is another strategy to create a boom in each market, this country that they try to enter. Obviously, very sophisticated visuals, physical appearance, clothing, hairstyle. So some critics of this operation, the industrial operation, say that, well, these girls and given, this cosmetic surgery at a very early age, etc., etc. Yes, that's true. Ironically, that was the big sort of helpful Korean cosmetic, this whole industry, right? As Korea has become the mecca of plastic surgery. And it's, again, synergetic sort of operation that these idol groups, just so, fanciful in terms of, appearance, and they're very tall, and that creates this, in some ways, as these images of how Asian youngsters can be tall and look like, this Western youth and things like that. So clothing, hairstyle, etc. And interestingly, this hair coloring became a big phenomenon in Korea, and then of course it spread other parts. And not that Korea started in Japan; there was already that kind of phenomenon, probably earlier than that it occurred in Korea. But these kind of music videos certainly helped a little bit more conservative parts of Asia, to kind of slowly accept the quote-unquote Western cultural invasion kind of mediated by Asian youth, Koreans. So when I went to, for instance, Malaysia, I see these youngsters, they kind of had this, yellow and whatnot, and so, oh, I'm a fan of this group and that group. So certainly it has, a tremendous cultural impact in terms of softening the attitude of the older generations, even in a very conservative places like Malaysia, Cambodia, Vietnam. Another, like I said, the dedicated fan clubs, and I can tell you this, it's my own anecdote. Dedicated fan clubs, definitely K-pop has a huge followers when they arrive, all these fans kind of occupy the airports. There's an everyday kind of, anecdotes that you read in Korean newspapers. Although my episode, the anecdote, involves an actor, not K-pop singer. I tried to bring one K-pop singer, but it was way above our budget, so we couldn't do that. But I invited a well-known Korean actor to our campus, University of Georgia campus, back in 2007. And he was very famous, but not like a top, class. Wow, the moment I announced that we're going to have this campus event with the actor Park Shin-young, my email account became full every day. I started getting email messages from all over the world, literally all over the world. Several from somewhere in Africa. I mean, to this day, it's a mystery for me how they got to know about this. So they just follow this news. So we had a very interesting sort of a meeting between our students and this actor. And that time, the most dedicated fan clubs were Japanese. They sent me very polite messages, and then I was so excited. So I decided to entertain them. So I said, oh, Park Shin-young ate, 2 eggs for breakfast this morning. This was a big news, exclusive news. Only this fan club could have, right? Then other fan clubs didn't know that he had 2 eggs that morning and things like that. So I experienced that literally. Oh my goodness. They just follow every single thing that is famous, as people do. And then finally a year later, just before that, we had a successful, campus event. I had leftover posters, big smile of this actor in the nice portion. I was packing my stuff to go to Korea in summer. And then I thought, am I going to throw them away? Then I thought, well, it's maybe a waste. Why don't I just send them to the whoever, runs this fan club? So I sort of rolled them up and then sent them to this lady called Hiromi. And then 2 months later, I got this big message from her saying that they actually, framed it, put it in front of this big auditorium with very expensive wine bottles and all kinds of balloons and everything. It was his 40th birthday that day. They had a big celebration without him. Only fans gathered in that auditorium. They had a huge party, and then only that club had that poster that nobody else had in Japan. So I thought that, okay, now I can see that clearly. Afterwards, Hiromi sent me, just a big message of thanks and all that, and then asked me when I will visit Japan. So I said, yes, actually, I'm involved in study abroad program. I'm going to bring our students to Kyoto on such a day. And guess what? She said, oh, we'll pick you up from the airport. So they treated me like, it's just by extension, I'm part of their idol. So since then, there was a 2007, 2008. I meet her every day. And for one day, we just tour all over Kyoto, and she takes me to nice restaurants, etc., etc. Then when she visited Korea in summer, I thought that I should do something in return. So then the actor Park Shin-young started a steakhouse, famous, dry steak. He said that he just got into that when he was briefly staying in New York. So he opened a sort of a steakhouse. So I brought her to that place. And by then, our small group became 4, So 2 of my Korean friends and Hiromi and her friend, we all went to the steakhouse. And she was so, moved that the following year when I went to Japan, she took me to a nicer place. So this has become an annual ritual for me. Can you imagine? All I did was just bringing one Korean actor to our campus. It's not even New York or California. We're talking about Georgia, right? It's an hour and a half drive from Atlanta, north of Atlanta. Then afterwards, it's a history. So right before I came up to New York for this event, I got email. Are you coming back to Kyoto this year? And very unfortunately, our study abroad got canceled. Had been canceled just before that. So I had to send a very sad message. So now I'm thinking about visiting Japan, maybe just personally, just for one day. And one of the most interesting stuff from in terms of my experience is that small group grew into another fan club. It's my fan club this time, right? And 2 ladies, very old ladies, are waiting for me. I said, I didn't understand. Why they would want to see me, not Park Shin-young or any other big figures in Korean pop culture. And these ladies said that their husbands allow them or permit them go and spend the whole day freely only on that day. So they're waiting for me to come back to Japan. And now I have even cultural pressure that, I have to be back. Otherwise, these ladies may not have this one free day in their life from their husband and whatnot. I don't know whether that story was true or not, but their husbands kind of accepted. And they're, early 70s. They accepted the fact that this is a big global phenomenon. And then one American professor who created this event will visit, and then their wives, would meet her and spend a day and, introducing Japanese culture to her. So in the minds of these 2 older husbands, the older generation Japanese men, it's just something that they can legitimately or gracefully sort of, accept. And they, I don't think, these ladies are stuck in their homes. It's just that probably that's one big excuse they, sort of gave a joke. But, we now spend one day together from morning to end, and they drive me around Kyoto, Kobe, Osaka, and we are running out of places to visit, So you can see that the impact, it's not just the music and dance, it's something else. So, it's kind of funny, sort of a joke that I always say, I'm part of all this, trend called Korean wave. Okay, before, by the way, if you have any questions, please raise your hand anytime just to stop me, and we'll deal with those questions. As Korean pop music became has become globalized, we started seeing that these entertainment these companies started sort of a custom tailor groups, their styles of musical styles and sort of dance routines. So I'm going to show you 2 different cases. Okay, so let's take a look at group called Kara. This is girl group. It's number 6, please. No, 6 first. It's a Kara. Yeah. Now, Kara is the number 1 group in Japan. And they are so popular. And on the street, you can see that actually in Tokyo, Ginza, and, you can see all kinds of, these products related to this group. Okay, now you can compare this music video with the next one. Girl group called 2NE1. So let's play number 5. Yes. Now this group appeals more to American youth. By the way, this song is called "I'm the Best." So which one do you like better? The first one, Kara? This one? This one? Yes, there's certainly, right. You can clearly see the different orientations. Instead of sort of a pretty, feminine sort of features, they clearly show, power, this women's power. So 2NE1, now, I think the most popular girl group outside Korea. In Korea, there are new groups, but 2NE1, the recent actually release was also pretty interesting, but this was almost like I was stunned when I, watched this for the first time. Wow, this is totally different direction from the previous, songs and dances of the girl groups. So it's almost like... But then, I don't know if you remember, there were like a small drum players as a background. Has anybody seen this traditional Korean sort of, drum dance? So you can see it's a variation of that theme. So here and there, you can see that it's not just sort of copying the Western formula, but they sort of insert the things from traditional Korean performing arts that make their performance a little bit unique. And then in this case, it just perfectly matches this pyramid, which is very exotic. And there are these metal jackets and whatnot and clubs, So 2NE1's "I'm the Best" was a really huge shock to Koreans, even the youth. Wow. And then the English translation, "I'm the Best," does not give that very sort of this, I don't know how to express it. The Korean title is "내가 제일 잘 나가," means I'm the coolest, I'm the best, I don't give a damn, that kind of expression. So there's a very strong implication that, don't compare me with others. Or parents get shocked, Don't compare my English grades with my classmates, or better than me and that kind of stuff. So the Korean title could not be properly translated into English. So English title is just "I'm the best." But in Korean, there's a very strong rebellious sort of message already expressed. Okay. So finally, in 2012, somebody that almost everybody in this room, I hope, knows that Psy, so made a breakthrough. So his Gangnam Style was released on YouTube, created K-pop's major and long sort of anticipated breakthrough in the Western mainstream media. So once it went viral, as you know, right? So Psy is now considered, after Seo Boys, so many girl groups, boy groups, and now Psy is another landmark in the history of Korean pop music. So just, take a look at, I'm sure that you probably watched this music video before, but why don't we look at it one more time? And it has really interesting messages,
오빤 강남 스타일 강남 스타일 오빤 강남 스타일
So Gangnam Style became a big code word, and whenever my students go to Korea, they said, "Oh, please, Dr. Yi, let's go to Gangnam." And Gangnam is like a huge, place that it's a kind of newly developed area. I went to Seoul National University, and when we were college students, that area was just so cheap. I mean, it was a muddy field, literally. So we could buy, small, probably piece of that land with the money we actually made by tutoring English or math and whatnot. So it was the 1970s. But now Gangnam is the hot place. All these designer shops and fancy, cafes and whatnot. So students know Gangnam. They almost think Gangnam in Seoul is Gangnam style. So Psy is certainly the most important figure, one of the important figures in K-pop. And the fact that this song became very popular in sort of Western Europe, in North America, sort of sent out a lot of this promising and positive sort of signs to other young entrepreneurs in Korean culture industry who wanted to enter the American market. So there are some attempts again, but once you have this big success formula, then there are all kinds of these copycats never really got any attention from other other than probably initial just sort of responses from Koreans. So this is basically most of the important aspects of K-pop. Before I close this session, I want to mention something that a lot of people sort of overlook. One of the important broad sort of the musical influences that sort of became almost a nutrition for this K-pop as we know of it now is Joseon punk rock. There's these indie groups which played for a long time, even before the beginning of this phenomenon. And they clustered, they played mostly clubs and sort of, student, the places a student used to frequent. Hongik University. It's in the middle of western part of Seoul. And there are many underground rock bands that time. And there's a special documentary made on these groups, and I was asked to review that the documentary many years ago. So obviously these underground bands, they became sort of almost anonymous when we talk about this very flash part of K-pop, but they were there. And then among them, the most important group is called Crying Nut. And they deliberately stay in an independent group. So they try to protect themselves from these large sort of, dinosaur entertainment companies, sort of exploit their talents, and then their artistic integrity would be lost. So Crying Nuts and many other indie groups are still sort of slightly away from this industry. So let's take a quick look at one last important element in understanding K-pop. So Peter, please play the number 8, Crying Nuts. It's called Run the Horse. So you can see it's not really dance routine, okay? But this is one of the most popular songs. Eventually, Crying Nut started appearing in on television shows and stuff because there was so much demand from mainstream society. And this is the song that earned them the fame. Okay. This is from early 2000. So you can see that they actually create this culture, this atmosphere that the audience and the performance interact together as you do in clubs. And also, it's called Run the Horse. Run the Horse is a sort of an earlier form of this very hooking, repetitive refrain that a lot of other idol groups sort of, developed later in a much more diverse styles. So here they already started in the early 1990s. So I saw an interview of one of these members. They are now, of course, in their 30s, and then they sort of confessed that there are lots of temptations from the mainstream, these management companies that they want to recruit individual members. They kind of pick and choose, people that they want, and then basically disband the rest, right? So it was very difficult decision to stay together as a group, because in terms of musical talent, they were really talented. Not so much, they didn't depend on their appearance or these fancy clothes or whatnot. So that's why probably they could stay level, but those who are with knowledge of the Korean indie music know these groups very well. Even overseas fans, sort of respond to this. But because their popularity was again stay on the underground level, that if you go to Hongik University area, you can sometimes see them performing. Of course, they are now old, and then there are new groups, but the K-pop, the typical Big Bang and Super Junior, 2PM, these groups became the main sort of the trend that not many people know about. This what they call Joseon punk rock groups, and Joseon is the name of the last dynasty in Korean Peninsula. So they deliberately identify themselves as a Joseon punk rock. They're sort of distinguishing themselves from other Western punk rocks. Okay, so this is the most of the stuff that I prepared for this session.
Okay, I think we'll take a short break. Thank you, Dr. Yi.
Thank you.